We can switch it up. Switch it up like it's about to go up, break them like internet. Goofies run up, we leave them in the dead.
You say, okay, I have a lot of money, but you have no money unless you take profits.
When the first ever spot ETF was created for gold 10x.
And the only thing I really knew was Bitcoin at the time, so I just invested very heavily into that. Rode it all the way up.
What's up?
My name is Jeff. Even the creators have said it's going to be the predecessor of CBDC.
What that taught me was that I need to be self-sufficient.
A solid DCA investment strategy, and pretend the red sell button doesn't even exist.
We about to go up like.
Whew, those diamond hands were tested today, weren't they, gentlemen? They were tested today. Oh, it was insane. Everybody that's listening right now, whether you're listening live or whether you're catching this on the replay, what I want everyone to do right now is just take a deep breath. Just take a deep, solid breath, exhale, and relax. It's not the end of the world. All right? This is not the end of the world. We definitely had our diamond hands tested today. Richard Hart being sued by the SEC. That's the main headline that's coming out of today's episode. We appreciate everyone that's able to watch. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Make sure you guys are hitting that notification bell. Everyone that's listening live, throw in some questions that you guys have. We would absolutely love to answer them. So getting into the topic today, again, SEC sues Richard Hart. So that's what we're going to be discussing this evening. Panel, how we doing? What are our initial thoughts? Brendan, I want to come on over to you first, man. Come off of mute, and what are some of your initial thoughts, and then we'll roll on down the list.
Yeah, it was interesting, man. All this dropped as I'm literally boarding an airplane, and I think I was the first person in any of the main chats to put a link to the potential that the SEC might be suing. Might be suing Richard Hart. And so I definitely, the first thing that I did is I just snap sold 100,000 EHEX just in case it dipped. And then if it didn't really do much of a dip, whatever. So I sold a bunch. It did dip heavy, but the first thoughts are, this is very interesting, right? We've seen a lot of lawsuits from the SEC of involving what seems to be a randomness of platforms that they want to attack. People maybe specifically that they want to attack, like Richard Hart, and how they're doing it and their timing of it's very interesting as well, right? So what happened in conjunction with this? They're also telling Coinbase again, hey, can you pretty please stop selling on unregistered securities, pretty please, because we don't really have any way to stop you because we just got handed a fat L by Ripple. And likely, if we continue to take you to court, we're going to get another fat L. So we'll just continue to ask you nicely. And I guess one of the questions that we're gonna dive into today, and a question that was the first in my mind was, hey, does the SEC have any legs to stand on against Richard Hart, Hex, and Pulse Chain ecosystems, right? That is really, really important. That's pretty much all I want to say. But before I get into much more, I just want to remind everyone that this is not financial advice. What we're talking about today is just news. We're just talking about, things that have happened within the crypto world, within the financial markets, regarding the SEC, and nothing that we say is financial advice or should be taken as such. That's all I want to say. Josh, throwing it back to you.
Jay, we're going to be doing some TA here in a minute on the Pulse Chain ecosystem. I don't want to get to it quite yet. I want to, sort of go around the room here for a minute. But did you see anything particularly interesting when you were looking at the charts today? Is there anything that stuck out? Is there anything that was shocking to you that you saw that you could comment on?
Not the chart specifically, brother. I noticed that out of all of the tokens, there was only one that made a new all-time low. That was incentive, and I'll go over more of those later on as we go over the charts. But it seems like that both both P Hex and E Hex out of all the tokens are the ones that held up strongly in terms of ratios. I mentioned this to a few of the guys in the chat and a few of our members that if they didn't have any capital to DCA in now, and they still wanted to get in under the action, to take a look at the ratios. Because in terms of both P Hex and E Hex, they actually made new local highs against their respective pairs with the RH ecosystem tokens, right? But aside from the obvious severe drop in prices that we saw with the ecosystem tokens, there was nothing really that surprising to me, right? I was like, okay, we got some really bad FUD from the SEC, right? Gary's coming after Hex. And we'll go over this a little bit later on in the show. But I think this was inevitable to a degree. And I think this is precisely why Richard Hart was so quiet over the last few months. I think it was either he was staying low key because he noticed that the SEC was increasing their rate of attack on the cryptocurrency industry as a whole, especially when they came after both Coinbase and Binance, two of the largest exchanges here in the US. I think Binance is the largest exchange in the world. And so he was like, look, if Gary and the SEC are increasing the rate of attack to these other companies, I think I should lay a little bit low. I think that's why the Instagram was disabled. I think that was when he made the transition from the humble brag, right? To the humble Richard Hart, because he wanted to take as much attention away from him and the ecosystem as possible. It also explains the fact why he changed the language around Hex from proof of stake to the mining, right? From staking to mining. So as far as the charts are concerned, there wasn't anything really that surprised me. Where it's going to go from here, we'll go over later. And I'm sure some of the other guys have some input on that as well. But nothing surprising, brother. Nothing surprising, to be honest.
Hey, Will, do you put any credence into that? Do you think that that Richard Hart maybe saw it coming around the corner, and that's, is that something that you agree with what Jay just said?
I will not disagree with it. I don't like speculating on what I think Richard Hart is thinking regarding what he's doing. I like judging him based off of his actions. So I do know that he did these things and it worked out well, and it's continuing to work out well. I don't know what he's planning on doing. I don't know what's next in the pipeline. I do trust his judgment more so than I trust most of the folks in the cryptocurrency development and production world. But yeah, I think that's a fair inference to make, is that he probably saw this stuff coming and then decided to act differently. So I think that the ecosystem is going to be fine. Everything will be okay. And we'll all be good.
Hey, Dace, do you think how much of a role do you think the community put into today when the wick started to go down and those prices started to really get low? You saw it sort of suck itself up a little bit, and price sort of rebounded a little bit. How much did the community play in that?
That's something that's very interesting, and it's that very thing has actually driven me to want to get better at on-chain analysis in some of those, high traffic or high interest moments, let's say. Yeah, I think in some ways, if you look at I'm kind of combining a couple of things here. There's a gap at the bottom of the weekly chart for Pulse between the first green candle and the second red candle. And we went down and touched that gap that we haven't really filled with price action. I think the RH folks are all learning how to become multi-coiners, right? It's not just buy a coin and stake it. And that's showing some in terms of the reactionary price action. I imagine the Ripple people will have things to say about Hex people complaining. I'm sure we'll get into that later, but on the community point, you know, we have the Ripple case with the SEC to look at. And even with Ripple dumping their coins on their own community, the case actually kept Ripple alive during that time in some ways, I think you could argue. And so it's an interesting thing. I'm not saying what will or won't happen, but given Hex's community presence, and this is the galvanizing thing that I think the community needed. And that seeing that action, seeing it bounce back tells you that people are still interested in the coin, and people think that the prices that we moved to today were valuable enough to start taking stabs at it. That's what the chart shows you. You can't argue with that.
You know, I think, Dace, you made a very good point there. If it wasn't already very obvious that the community as a whole needed to stand in solidarity, especially after the large schism that happened between EHEX and PHEX folks, right? I think this is exactly that kind of galvanizing event that you need in order to tell people, look, man, we're already the black sheep, like RH and the ecosystem as a whole. They're already the black sheep of the cryptocurrency community. And the infighting that has been going on over the past few months is not going to help us in our goal to invite more people within the ecosystem, right? So I think you made a very good point there, and I think this is exactly the event that the community needed in order to start coming back together like they were in the beginning before Pulse Chain released. So that's a very good point.
I agree. I think it gives you a bit of an in, right? And then now you can say to newbies who've never heard of this stuff, they hear about it on the news. And now instead of telling them why which hex is better or whatever, you're just going to onboard them, right? Because they're going to be interested. I agree.
What I thought was most interesting is that the wick didn't last that long. It was maybe an hour to 2, 3 at most, maybe 4 at the highest. It didn't last that long. I think the community responded pretty well. Nate, I want to come over to you. You said, as you were mentioning before the stream, that like as soon as you got word, you were started to make moves. What sort of confidence did you have? What did you foresee happening? If you could talk on that a little bit, and then maybe touch on some of the ratio plays that you did, some of the ratio trades and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the thing is that the second I saw, the wicks going up and then just instantly down, right? I was like, okay, the fact that these red candles are going crazy, that means buy right now. I don't hesitate on that stuff. Like when I know a buying opportunity when I see it, and especially when it drops like quite literally to below what was that called? The sack price, right? When it drops below sack price and just continues on down, it gets even further down, and then we get all new lows and all that. It's like, you buy that stuff, man. Does that mean you just ape everything into it? No, but you should probably put a little bit of a bigger DCA, right? So as soon as I saw that, those huge red candles, what I did was just simply took the DCA that was going to be for next week, right? Which was a big one, by the way, too. I happened to get lucky on this one. But I took that and immediately used a credit card to actually get it in instantly. I happened to get, I would say, fairly lucky too, because of the congestion from Portal X, right? Some people unfortunately got hit with that. Mine happened to go through. I got a funny suspicion it's because I was going through Polygon, not Ethereum. I think that might have been something, because everybody who was getting clogged up was all on Ethereum. So yeah, and I started throwing money everywhere. One thing I think people are kind of underestimating a little bit was actually Hedron. A big piece of my DCA I actually put into Hedron immediately. That was a very, very good price on that one. So yeah, you got to act quickly, right? You need to understand and know when it's a good opportunity. The second it is a good opportunity, don't be like, oh, well, maybe it'll go lower, maybe it'll go. No, just take your chance, right? Throw some more at it. I knew that there was a good possibility maybe it could drop a little bit more, but I also knew that if I put that money in right there, I'm going to be somewhere close to that bottom spot. And then when I go to like take some profits and start ratio trading, I can literally say, hey, I bought in here, you know, right at that bottom, right? And maybe it's not the perfect bottom, but it's pretty damn close. So you got to act quickly. You just got to know what you got to do. And you just got to hold tight to your plan, you know?
And that speaks to the importance of having a plan. You ultimately need to have a plan, whether it's, you know, if this thing goes to zero, what's my plan? Or if this thing starts to pump up and up and up, you know, what am I going to do? What's my continuing DCA strategy? So absolutely. We're going to touch on plans. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Billy, I want to bring you in. If you could just speak on a little bit, you know, when you were looking at sentiment and stuff like that, we can get into this a little bit later too, but some initial quick thoughts that you saw when you were going through the sentiment, you know, when you were looking through social media and everything like that. Is there anything you saw that rung a bell? Is there anything that, you know, because it seemed to have come out of nowhere. You know, it was a quick announcement. It was on a Monday. Here it is at the end of the month. You know, we have, you know, we don't really have any indicators pointing to this sort of thing. So what was the sentiment that you saw initially?
I learned about it, you know, of course, through our chats first off. And, you know, right off the bat, you know, you could tell that, you know, we kind of need each other in these times to, you know, get you an idea, get your bearings straight, because, it's easy to have an emotional reaction to the price going down, you know, and it's easy for people to question the whole thing at that point. So on, you know, this Twitter space, they said that, you know, it was one big PLS dump that really got the whole thing going, and that person dumped billions of PLS and, you know, for a couple $1 million. And because there was so much liquidity, they were able to do that. And that just, you know, is kind of what started the little cascade. But they said it didn't continue so much after that. We started seeing people buying it right back up, you know. So it was in some respects an isolated event on chain with that one big dumper. But no, it's obvious the community is not going anywhere. And these guys are, you know, spinning it as this is fuel to the fire, you know, fuel to the fire of the movie, fuel to the fire of, you know, getting the word out. And, you know, we're not on large exchanges, so they can't take us off of large exchanges. You know, they can't shut DeFi down, apparently, if they don't like it. You know, this is a civil suit, you know, one of many, possibly, who knows. But for what it's worth, I think the sentiment was remarkably positive after the first initial shock of what was happening.
Hey, Tracker, I want to bring you in here. I know that you and Nate and Jeff, you guys had been in the process of filming yet another DR Insights. You guys were talking about LPing strategies and different systems. This kind of derailed the whole situation. You know, what did you see on your end? When did you find out about it? And what were your initial thoughts behind it?
Yeah, I'll try. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, man, you're good to go.
Can you guys hear? All right, cool. So when I got wind of it, I immediately saw the plunge. I jumped on immediately and started making trades immediately, because I always know when there's a drop like that, it's an opportunity, like just like what Nate just basically laid out. For an LP, I got in. I liquidated my LP on Chirp Finance, locked in that stuff. Still ended up making money, a little bit of money on all that, even with everything tanking and dropping. So if anything, it held up my position pretty well. So I took all that and immediately threw it right at Pulse. Picked it up at Pulse right around, I guess that 5 1/4 mark. Somewhere in there. I didn't catch the 4s, but I caught around the 5. So I felt okay with that. And then immediately jumped in, and then I swapped some of my P Hex. I swapped that. It was funny. We had switched in the day before into E Hex, which I thought was hilarious. So then we swapped it back today, and then saw that massive spike on the Pulse X side of the house for all the ratios. So immediately jumped in and made some swaps into Pulse X too, just on those major highs. Just because anytime we get these crazy jerk reactions, there's just tons of opportunities. And then, yeah, things could go lower, like Nate said, but it was one of those people overreacted way too quick. I know I was listening to some. He said a big whale had moved money over or something, and that caused the immediate big drop. So I don't know if that's what triggered the cascading effects. But my thoughts were this: after I saw, and actually when I heard all the stuff coming out, it was like they were targeting basically. What he said. It didn't say a damn thing about the ecosystem that I'm concerned. So to me, it's just like get in line. We're gonna go down the same gauntlet as the SEC against all the other good cryptos. But I think it made one thing that took my attention was the Hex ecosystem under Richard Hart has taken notice. The fact that they stepped in and served him from the SEC. Think about it. You got the movie coming out. You have all these things that are coming out. He's basically a threat now. The ecosystem's a threat to the mainstream crypto ones. This is why he was blacklisted on CoinMarketCap, and this is just another feather to go slowly.
Sounds like we lost him there.
Right.
Yeah. If we can get him back, we'll certainly try to get him back. We love when he has some pretty solid insight.
Josh, let me make a quick comment real quick on something that both Tracker and Nate spoke about. I kind of wanted to answer really quickly some of the questions here. Ray's first question was a quick explanation on ratio trades. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, that if you didn't have any capital sitting on the side, but you still wanted to get into the action, it's good to get into the habit of looking at the price of an asset against its pair, right? As opposed to just looking at it against the US dollar. Because, for example, if you didn't have any capital sitting on the side, but you had a whole bunch of PHEX and you had a whole bunch of PHEX, we made new local highs against those specific pairs. I posted the list earlier in the chat that, for example, against Pulse, PX hit a new local high of 1 to 227. Against Pulse X, it was almost 1 to 800, right? And then EHEX, it was, I believe, 1 to almost 104 Pulse, and then 1 to about 400 Pulse X. And so if you were sitting in a considerable amount of PHEX and EHEX, you didn't need any new capital sitting on the side, right? Because you were still able to take advantage of those drops, but not against the US dollar, but against the ratios. So if you look at any website, for example, like TradingView, like Dex Screener, and you pull up a certain pair, right? Not Hex against US dollar, but for example, Hex against Pulse, Hex against Pulse X. It'll actually show you the ratio that those two pairs are trading on. And so I encourage you, Ray, to get familiar with how those ratios interact. That way, you're going to be able to take advantage of those trades, even if you don't have any capital sitting on the side. So that's in regards to ratios, right? Now, Centurion, on the other hand here, he asked, do you guys think that we're going to have another dramatic drop? Now, I was also speaking about this with the guys earlier, that what happened today, where we had a significant drop in price, we had an automatic rally up. Now, this is something that happens whenever we have a significant drop in price. And I'm not just talking about tokens within the RH ecosystem, right? I've seen this happen over and over again in other ecosystems. We get a severe drop in price, people buy up the price, and then depending on how the news plays out over the time course of, for example, this week, it will determine whether we bleed slowly back down and find new lows, or we rally back up, right? And so I encourage everybody here that's listening live and that will be listening after we're done here, to really keep your head in a swivel and pay attention to the news as it develops over the coming weeks and over the coming months, because that's what's going to determine whether we're going to find new lows, right? Drop again, or we're going to start climbing back up. All right, so I just wanted to touch on those two things real quick before we get into the weeds of the case, and then we kind of lose some of the questions. So I just wanted to address those. Did you guys want to add anything to that at all?
Yeah, I'd add two things. First of all, like you said, you have to pay attention to the news. It's really important to always be paying attention, because crypto not only never sleeps, but things happen very quickly, right? Like today, it was in a matter of 20 or 30 minutes, and we dropped 60, 70+%. And so if you were tied in, if you were dialed in, if you had your notification set on Dex Screener, if you had your notification set for coins, if they get below a certain price, to ping your phone, then you are going to be the first ones able to make those trades and wait and watch and be in there early. So it's not just, paying attention to Twitter. It's not just paying attention, to the market, but there are plenty of ways to set notifications to ensure that you get notified right when things happen. And I was lucky to be in there early, get some really good ratio trades in, and then be able to buy back in, lower and essentially increase my coins by 20, 30, 40, 50% in some cases. And that's, ratio trading in that way can be a little bit risky, right? If you're trading for one coin just in the hope of getting more back later, that can be really risky. So unless you really know what you're doing, swing trading ratios is challenging. But if you're going to want to increase your position based on a really good ratio, as Jay was saying, then I think that is a very smart thing to do, especially when we're talking about increasing coins in a level 1 blockchain like the Pulse Chain ecosystem. Now, again, you have to do your own research. You have to figure out what's best for your portfolio. We're only giving you some news and some ideas of things that we've seen people do, but it's not financial advice. And really, to be self-sufficient, self-sovereign in this space is really important. That's why you can't wait for someone to notify you on Twitter. You can't wait for someone to notify you on a Telegram chat. You have to be ready to be notified instantly when things start to make a move. Now, don't get me wrong, Twitter and WhatsApp are where I first got the news, but also I had price point set, so everything was dinging for me, ding, 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 down the board, and that's just setting off fireworks, knowing that I have to hop in. I'm literally sitting on an airplane. And I don't really always like to do a lot with mobile. I do have some wallets that I just do mobile, the smaller percentages of my portfolio, just in case something goes awry, right? Because mobile and Wi-Fi and things like that can be a little bit less secure than working on my laptop, working on a VPN. But it gives me the ability to trade real time when I have to, and so having all of those things set up and being ready and willing to do so at any time of the day, you just got to be ready to go. That's a long-winded way to say that, but
and I would actually, so I'm going to kind of add on a little bit there, Brendan. For the people who work a lot, right? It's like you don't have time to be sitting there watching, the ratios and watching the charts and just seeing all these things. So, I want to stress the importance of notifications, because that's really, quite frankly, the only way that I really am able to do anything. And I do a lot of mobile trades, but a lot of times too, when I see these notifications going off on mobile, I'll take a look at a very quick look at a chart or whatever, and I'll see where's the difference between it's dropping, then it's spiking back up again, kind of like what happened today, or is it just dropping because of some kind of news that came out and now people are it's gonna kind of crap a little bit because people are still kind of like, yeah, what's going on with it? That's where I can not panic and stress myself out and be like, okay, so this looks like it's just going to crap for a little bit. I'm going to catch that dip when I get home. It'll be just fine. Calm down. Right. Versus today where it's kind of like, yeah, why don't I get on that right now? I happen to get lucky today because it's my day off. And so I'm actually home at the computer, which is actually why I'm ratio trading right now, which, by the way, we do not recommend ratio trading unless you really know what it is you're doing. I myself, and I'm kind of throwing a little practice into it right now with today because I happen to have that opportunity and I know how to do it. But I don't recommend it for anybody else to just willy-nilly go out there and start doing it. You really, and if you are, for practice, use small amounts. Pulse Chain is a great place to put it. Really low gas fees. But yeah, be very careful with that, guys. Very careful.
Great insight as always, guys. It's so important to have a plan. It's so important to have a solid sense of news, whether it be through Deck Screener, through TradingView, whether it be through various crypto news platforms. It's always important. Make sure you guys are constantly checking the news. Can't speak on that enough. It also gives a good opportunity to plug our Telegram channel. So make sure you guys go into the description, check out our Telegram, click on that. I know within a couple hours of the mayhem starting up, Dace went ahead and started up a video call, and we were able to have a chat with everybody in our community. So definitely a good opportunity to plug the Telegram. So we've been, trying to get there for you guys. So definitely join that Telegram. We're we're constantly adding to it. I definitely want to go ahead and hop into the topic. So what I want to do first, Will and Dace, I want to ask you guys I want to ask you guys a question each. Will, I want to ask you first. What was your initial thought? How did you feel when you saw the price starting to come down? You rode Bitcoin all the way up in 2021, and then you watched it come back down. What sort of so your diamond hands have been forged. So living through that experience, if this is somebody who maybe they're brand new to the market and this was really the first time that they've had to test their diamond hands, or, they felt that drop like they're falling down on a roller coaster or something like that when they get that feeling in their stomach. What was your initial thoughts? How did you feel? And then, Dace, I want you to hop in right after and sort of give your intake as well.
So the first thing that I felt when I heard this news is, holy fuck, time to buy. Good shit, right? Because what essentially happens is anytime there's bad news in any sort of ecosystem is every person with weak resolve, every person that's in it for the short term, everybody that doesn't really know what they're doing, they see bad news, they feel bad thing, they're like, oh fuck, bad time, right? So I kind of skipped over the like, oh no, everything's going to shit phase, and just went immediately into the like what Nate was saying a minute ago, freaking, oh shit, it's time to buy some stuff. Now I allocated my capital and I made my moves and stuff, but I was excited. When I hear bad news, I get excited because that means it's time to purchase, it's time to grow the bags, it's time to generate the wealth for the future. And then whenever it's good news, it's like, oh shit, now my time to stop buying, time to just hold, time to wait for the bags to increase in value and stuff along those lines. So my initial reaction was excitement because I know that the crowd will be very disappointed. And also I have pretty much zero faith in the SEC being able to do anything like in the crypto sphere effectively. So like this is essentially just free publicity. This is free advertising, free marketing. Like we couldn't have done a better job. Like Gary could not be doing a better job giving us this final parting gift before he gets kicked the fuck out of office, right? Oh, and also one more thing before I'm done. Shout out to my boy Zach up in Connecticut watching right now. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Look, I agree. I think my first thought was, what is a like kind? What is an event that we can compare it to? And the closest thing we've got is XRP. And like I was saying earlier, the founders of XRP have been and still continue to dump on their people once a month to keep the offices open. And there's no Hex office. The point was already made. We're not on any centralized exchanges. And so I agree. I think after reading the suit and taking a look at it all, I really am overall pretty optimistic about it. I think market sentiment and reactivity is a very human thing. And the more emotionally connected you are to the thing, in this case, money, the more when those things change, people fear change. And embracing that change can be counterintuitive to people at first. And so you're talking about people who's it's the kind of their first test. I would say it's a good opportunity to really make sure, examine your position, make sure that you're aware of the risk you're taking, make sure you're comfortable with that risk. Also make sure you're comfortable with taking the risk of not taking enough risk, right? There's a rabbit hole to go down there. You want to make sure that you know where you stand on it, because like everybody always says, none of this is financial advice. This stuff is incredibly volatile. And like Brendan said earlier, it happens fast. I had my Dick Screener notifications up too. And in the time it took me to go get onto my computer and boot it up and take a look and see if I thought it was legit, it had already moved, 20, 30%. I mean, an incredible amount. And so, but no, I would agree with Will's take. I think if you look at my first instinct, my first thought was the chances of this being really good for Hex is actually quite high, because I think somebody just posted a link in one of the chats that we are on CNBC tonight. And so, yeah, I think it could be very, very good for the price long term after people get over their emotional reactions and depending upon other news that come out. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Hey, Billy, I want to bring you in here. Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on what Dace said about risk assessment, and it ties into what I mentioned earlier about folks that didn't have any capital on the side, right? There's precisely a reason why not just us, but good teachers and good mentors will tell you you have to hedge your portfolio against this kind of risk by actually having a position in Bitcoin and or Ethereum. Because if you don't have any capital right now, guess what? Do you think this news affected Bitcoin or Ethereum? The answer is no. Bitcoin and Ethereum are holding up the price that they opened at today, and they're still holding relatively strong, despite the fact that the overarching news right now is the SEC is actually telling Coinbase. Brendan alluded to it earlier. Hey, can you please Can you please delist tokens on your exchange aside from Bitcoin? Right. So this news actually happened again. Right. Earlier in the month, they said one part of the lawsuit was them telling both Binance and Coinbase to remove some of these assets, and now they're doing it again, right? So even within the broader perspective, right, Bitcoin and Ethereum haven't moved. And if you had positions in Bitcoin and Ethereum, guess what? Even if you didn't have any new capital sitting on the side to DCA into these lows, you might have Bitcoin and Ethereum. And those prices held up pretty steady, and you could certainly allocate a portion of those funds into whatever you wanted to DCA into now. So that's why it's important to really mitigate your risk against these sharp declines in price by having a position in Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So that's I just wanted to reiterate that, because I think people forget that when people forget the importance of having a rudder, right, or having a good foundation, because they fall in love so much with a particular ecosystem, with a particular founder or asset or whatever it might be, and they get tunnel vision. And then when something like this happens, instead of them being able to react to it, right, in a positive way, the only thing that happens is they get like dick punched, right in the feels, because they see their whole portfolio go down 60%. Right. And that's about the magnitude of the move downwards, right? The whole RH ecosystem, every single token within the ecosystem dropped about 50 to 60%. Right. So I just really wanted to reiterate that, because I know that folks have a tendency to over allocate into a specific ecosystem. So, and unless you're willing to take that kind of significant downside, hedge your portfolio with Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, Jay, one more thing that you said in the chat. Sorry, Josh. Just even a few days ago, before this news came out, was, hey, we're going to DCA in a little bit more of our dry powder at the numbers that we're at, but we're not aping it all in because we could see some potential for more downside. And right, so there's also this other aspect of not just hedging with Bitcoin and Ethereum and having a well-rounded portfolio that manages your risks properly, but also understanding the way that we DCA, dynamic, right, dollar cost averaging. And what does that mean? It means, okay, this is a good price for me to buy in yet, but based on the charts, based on the news, we could potentially see this coin go down further, and we don't want to just deplete our dry powder in case it does. So I know that I know that me, I know that Nate, I know we had some dry powder on the side just in case something were to happen. And guess what? I certainly deployed some of that dry powder today. Absolutely. And that felt real good because I was able to lower my costs on some of my coins quite well.
I backed the truck up, man. I had a large DCA for next week, and I pulled it in for this week instead. So now I'm going to be paying it off for next week. But I backed the truck up, man. I could see what was happening here.
Yeah, I'm with Nate on this one. Dynamic DCA is good and all, but I'm a fan of aping it all in when I see a fucking hell of a deal. It might prove wrong in the future, but I guess that's just that's a little contrarian viewpoint. So like it's fine to do the DCAs. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is a fantastic tool, and it's also fine to fucking ape it in and go all in, baby. So like it's you're spreading out versus like pinpoint sniper attack. You could think of it as like a machine gun or a shotgun versus like one single well aimed shot or something. So Sometimes you miss, sometimes you hit, sometimes the scatter gets you a better result, sometimes the pinpoint attack. It's just everyone has a different mechanism by which they want to attack growing their bags. So I'm with Nate on this one. I just fucking aped in, baby.
Yeah, but if you had aped in all of your money a week ago, you wouldn't have had any dry powder to ape in today. That's my point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Last week when I had all the money that I could have spent on many things, I aped it all in then too. So I just ape in every time I get a chance. This is fucking,
Yeah,
I
and that
take
kind
my
of
big
that
pile
kind of
of bananas
explains to the that kind of explains and it speaks to the difference in risk tolerance, right? Because we all have different strategies here. Will and Nate's risk tolerance in this particular scenario was actually very high. Me personally, I'm gonna allocate some of that capital that I'm sitting on the side, but I think that we still have the potential to go lower. And so I'm reserving a little of that dry powder on the side so that I can go in lower. Now, if it starts running on me in the other direction, that's just something that I'm going to have to live with. So this is actually a pretty good example of exactly the differences in risk tolerance for each individual person, right? So it's a good example of, okay, not everybody has the same plan, but each person on this panel is actually sticking to their plan.
It's so important you guys mention all that stuff. It's so important. Billy, go ahead and hop in here.
Personally, my plan today, or my mantra, was sometimes the best thing is to do nothing. So I didn't want to fuck with my bags. I like where they're at. And I knew if I tried to chase, the drop, and then I'd get, I'd end up buying back in for more, so to me, I made one little swap from some PHEX to Pulse because I'd been planning on doing that. And I actually got a better rate doing it today than I would have last night, But the best plan at times when it's chaotic like that, I think at times is to do nothing. And they said that on the Pulse chain launch. So I felt good about that, because if I start to really delve into the bags and fuck around, 9 out of 10 times that doesn't work for me. So, that's all I like to add about that moment. I mean, really, again, trying to turn, this into a positive, I think is really the way to approach this. And you guys are, by seeing this as an opportunity to buy more. I mean, that's a positive, right? But also, the way that this is going to kind of tee up the movie for everyone, because the movie is all about it being investigated as a scam, and we've seen the trailer, but that movie is going to be, out of this world. And I think that, it's going to draw attention, us being on the evening news, to the movie. So they said on that Twitter space, the guys that made the movie didn't know about this. They swear they didn't know this was going to happen. And they're excited as shit because this is the greatest advertising they could have ever asked for. So, I mean, it's hard to say if this is a plan or what, but let's just roll with the punches, I guess, is the vibe, right?
I got this wild theory here. All right. I had a wild theory earlier, and this is just for fun, right? I'm not being serious, but like, what if Gary Gensler is actually Richard Hart's little brother? There's that dude that keeps popping up on Twitter. He's like, oh, I'm the younger Schuler brother, or whatever the fuck. It's actually Gary Gensler. He's been wearing a mask this whole time, and this is his his magnum opus, or his coup de grace, the apex of his life. It's like, as I'm leaving the SEC, I'm gonna give you guys this parting gift. So just a fun
That's a hell of a
Swan
theory there,
song, my friend. It's called a swan song.
Swan song. Yes, thank you.
You joke, but people right now are talking about, was SBF behind the bald rug? That's a whole other story for another day. But stranger things have happened.
Yeah, stranger things have happened. Holy shit.
Yeah, so I think it would be really good if we could go over a little bit of the details between exactly what the SEC is claiming against Richard Hart and the ecosystem. I know that both Josh and Brendan have been diving into the case a little bit. The initial motion is actually a very short read. We'll go ahead and share that with you in the chat. Jen, if you could go ahead and share that, share the link for folks in the chat for the original motion that the SEC filed against Richard Hart. But if we could go over a little bit of the case details, I think it would really help give people a big picture understanding of exactly what is going on here. So if Josh or Brendan, if you'd like to speak on that, please go ahead.
Josh, why don't you go first, and then I'll follow you up. but we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm having a little computer trouble. Go ahead first, Brandon, and then I'll follow up behind you. I got to fix my hotkeys here, so my fault. Go ahead.
Sure. So it's really pretty interesting. I've read through the court documents a lot. The SEC's sort of case against Richard Hart. Honestly, if you've read the first half of it, a lot of it is just rehashing kind of over and over. More details on who Richard Hart is, what he did. One of the funniest things I think that's come from it is no one knew where Richard Hart lived. We just know that he was a United States citizen. In the SEC, it says that he's believed to live in Finland. They don't even really know if he lives there or not, but they believe that he might live in Finland. And I found that's interesting because he never disclosed where he lives, and he's never mentioned it. So I thought that was actually some really interesting information, just aside from the lawsuit specifically. But essentially what they're saying is, first, just like they're saying with Coinbase, just like they said with Ripple, is that Richard Hart created Hex, created Pulse Chain, created PulseX, and therefore he was selling unregistered securities that weren't, registered with the SEC. So what does that mean? If Hex and Pulse Chain and PulseX are actually securities, and he is selling those on a centralized platform, sufficiently centralized, I guess would be the opposite of sufficiently decentralized. And I'll get into that in a second. Then yes, maybe he is guilty. Okay, that's first. But second of all, if his projects are sufficiently decentralized, then they don't count as securities. Now, this is where we get into a really big gray area. What does it mean to be sufficiently decentralized? Okay. Now, we are also going to get in, and I'm going to let Jay cover this a little bit later, but there's 4 essentially pillars in the Howey test of figuring out if something is a security or not. So we are going to get into that a little bit later. But the SEC loves to use gray area terms like sufficiently decentralized. And they go through all of these things about Richard Hart promising yield in Hex for return in Hex. Also, when people sacrificed for Pulse Chain and PulseX, Richard Hart said, I listened to every stream. He said, you're sacrificing coins to freedom of speech with no guarantee of getting anything in return, right? You can't expect to make anything off of other people's time and investments. And he's specifically alluding to procedures of the Howey test. So essentially, they're not very happy with Richard Hart. They're not really happy with a few of the things that are going around. And we'll get into a little bit that later. But that's the general gist, right? That they're suing him for securities or for unregistered securities. And even though they just got handed a big loss in the Ripple case, a big loss, and in my opinion, this doesn't mean it's factual or true, Ripple is closer to a security than Hex, Pulse Chain, or PulseX. That's just my opinion. So if you're saying that the SEC just lost the case against Ripple, and now they're bringing other cases against Coinbase, now Richard Hart, that probably have even less legs to stand on, it's very interesting. And then you have to ask your question, okay, if they have less of a case against Richard Hart than they did versus Ripple, then what is their ultimatum? What's their goal here? Because if they lose again and again and again, then where's that leave them? Where's that leave Gary Gensler? Okay, and so the first question is, why are they doing this? If they just lost and are potentially going to lose again, that's one of the questions we'll get into. But yeah, that's a basic rundown of just the filing of the SEC, just the surface level.
Yeah, so the complaint itself, it's 27 pages. I would say probably 75 to 80% of it is just like if Richard Hart was writing an autobiography. I mean, it just pretty much described everything. There was a couple pieces of information that were it wasn't properly spell checked. My opinion of the complaint in general is that it was thrown to try to stick to something. Do I think anything will stick to it? Seeing how the wording was put in the grammatical errors and the spelling mistakes that were put into the complaints, I don't know if any serious investigation was put into this. Honestly, I think, in my personal opinion, I feel like it's a very emotional complaint. There isn't very much rational, fact-based information that shows that, hey, Hex Pulse Chain, it is a security. Richard Hart's in violation of this. Key point that I want to come to is, I mentioned this in the pre-show before we got started. In the final pages, I have it up here in front of me right now. In the final pages on page, 24, it tells the current status, and it says, as of June 30th, 2023, Hex price is 0.008, down from the high, and it tells what the high is, then it lists what Pulse Chain's price is, and then it lists what Pulse's price or Pulse X's price is. And then the final sentence in that section right there says, at present, Pulse and Pulse Chain are practically worthless, and Hex's value has dropped about 98.4% below all-time highs. So what that, I mean, obviously Pulse Chain, Pulse X, they're not worthless. Anybody that has either one of those coins in their portfolios knows that if those coins weren't in your portfolios, then your balance would be, different. It's all relative. If you have 100,000 Pulse and 100,000 or 100 million Pulse, 100 million Pulse X, your balance is going to look different than if you didn't have them in there. So obviously they're not worthless. To me, it almost smells like this was a lawsuit from a disgruntled investor that maybe the SEC just decided to do a copy paste job on. Again, there's nothing saying that that's the case. That's just the overall vibe that I get from it, that it comes from a disgruntled investor who was anticipating a much larger rate of return off of their SAC price. Maybe it was somebody who was a new investor into the ecosystem, and for whatever reason, it didn't play out like they saw in the YouTube videos or in the Twitter feeds that they follow, and they lost a lot of money and they didn't have access to it. Again, that's just wild speculation on my part. There's nothing saying that that's what's back behind it. That's just the overall vibe that I got. I want to sort of open it up. Dace, you mentioned you read it. Did you have any initial feelings like that, or what did you see? What were some of the highlight points that you saw when you were covering it?
Yeah, so the first, I would agree. A lot of it was just like, who is Richard Hart from the angle of somebody who already doesn't like them. I would say that it's my first thought was, did SBF do this? No, my first thoughts were, it feels like something that could go away with like a slap on the wrist fine at worst. And that's if they could somehow prove that the stuff that he bought for the marketing was from it's such a obtuse argument that they're making, and they're not even factual about the mechanics about Pulse Chain. A couple of my thoughts also went to Richard Hart's change in conduct since the launch of Pulse Chain, the lack of streaming, his wardrobe change, his Twitter change, and I think significantly, the fact that he took down his day one validators and posted on Twitter about it and burned all the proceeds. I think that was a very insightful, intentional, and orchestrated move in anticipation of something like this. That way he can say he owns no piece of sustaining the chain. That my mind really went to that post first, and I was like, I wonder why you would do that And then I realized, okay, the burn's cool, whatever. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's exactly why you want to do it. You want to do that in case somebody comes and says, hey, do you own this? You keep it going. You say no. So that was my first thought after reading it. And yeah, as to what happens with it, gosh, I think it depends on Gary's fate, right? And Gary's fate is kind of in bigger. I think Gary's in bigger trouble. I think this is a desperation move from the SEC to keep up appearances after the Ripple loss and to focus attention on somebody who they thought would be able to you know, I think they want to demonize crypto and the people that they target. And I think this is an apt target for them to put up and say, hey, look, we're doing the job. From their perspective, those were all kind of my first thoughts on it. It just seems like a good whipping boy to publicize, to say that we're going after all the scammers and all the fraudsters, or whatever he calls them.
Dace, you said something interesting. You said that they were desperate. And I think that's interesting because, right, we just mentioned that they got handed their biggest loss, maybe in the history of suing someone. That could have been the loss that Ripple gave them, might have been the biggest loss the SEC has ever taken in court. That was a huge, I can't underestimate how big of a decision that was by the judge to deem Ripple not to be a security. Okay, that's one of the biggest decisions in the history of court cases with the SEC. So yes, they're afraid, and they want to show people that they still have power to hold what they deem as securities to need to be registered. Now, again, they won't tell these exchanges about what makes crypto a security and what doesn't. So they've never been clear or open about it. All they want is to assert control and dominance. And right now, after taking a big L, what does the government do, or Big Brother want to do? They want to continue to assert dominance and show you that, hey, we are the one that makes the decisions here. Okay. And they're very desperate. I think that as Jay said, coinciding with them reiterating to Coinbase that they can only sell Bitcoin is crazy. It's crazy. And BlackRock and all these other institutional investors have put Coinbase as their custodians if the spot ETF goes through in the future. And they're being sued by the SEC. So again, there's just a lot of FUD surrounding these, and it does seem like a desperation move. I'd have to agree with that.
Truthfully,
and I want to.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight what Jemima mentioned. She brought up a really good point that in the complaint, it was mentioned that he used money that was received from the sacrifice to buy luxury items. There's nothing that you could correlate with that. There's no factual basis that you can draw from that unless you have a substantial investigation that takes a look into bank accounts and can trace that sort of money and stuff like that. And then you're looking at that from a criminal aspect at that point. So to even make that sort of allegation, I don't know what sort of strength you can put behind a comment like that without it being also on the criminal side. Is there anybody that has any additional input on that aspect, or can maybe counter what I'm saying?
No, Josh, you made a really good point there, because guess what? We were discussing this earlier, but the allegation that the SEC levied against him that he was using consumer funds that were part of the I guess the ICO, right? That they're going to claim to buy luxury goods. Well, not just us, but a lot of people that are covering the story right now have made it a point to say that all of the funds are on chain, and you can see that none of those funds have moved, right? Especially when it comes to the sacrifice of Pulse Chain and Pulse X, right? Those sacrifice phases, none of those funds have moved. And so if they're going to levy these accusations against him, all the evidence right there is on chain, which is what makes cryptocurrency really good, right? Because you can look at the evidence on chain and say, did the funds move or not? And the answer is no. And so that accusation right now, you could throw that out the window. So I don't think anybody can make the argument that Richard used the funds to buy luxury goods, right? Charles made a pretty good point. In addition to that, right, he was a self-made billionaire, allegedly, before all of this even happened, before he even created the Hex. And so unless they can actually follow the paper trail, and the paper trail does exist, right, because the data's right there on chain, they could see it if they want to, right? They're gonna find nothing. So in terms of that, well, that's one strike against them, right? When it comes to this case.
If that's one, I'll go ahead and give you another one then. This is going to be strike number 2. During the sacrifice phases, it was specifically stated in writing that you are not to expect any kind of profit out of it. That alone would kill any idea of a security, because a security is expectation of profit. So I'm sorry, guys, but the SEC is stupid. they're just playing dumb, man.
Well, so what this reminds me of, like, with them making these super duper fake allegations, is like it's like there's an old fucking 4chan saying where people are like, oh, you wrote words on the internet, cool, I can also write words on the internet. Like, they have no proof to back up their claims. They're just talking out of their ass. Like, there's going to be some idiots out there that believe them at face value. There's going to be some people that look into it and find out the truth and like, oh shit, turns out the SEC is probably lying about a whole bunch of shit, and this is conjecture at this point, right? But like, the SEC is probably not being truthful about a lot of things because they're making these really simple and easy to disprove mistakes. So that, like, every single move that they're making helps out our community in every way, except for like the blind sheep that are just going to follow what the government says regardless, in which, like, we're not going to win those guys over anyways.
Yeah, and it was interesting because in the lawsuit, they speak in very gray terms, not black and white. And they say that, yeah, well, maybe Richard Hart said these things because they said he's very familiar with the Howey test. And Jay, maybe you need to get into the Howey test here shortly. But they said he was very tongue-in-cheek with his disavowals about making profit. How is every time you speak saying don't expect profit, writing down on the website where you sacrifice, that you're sacrificing to freedom of speech, and you can't expect to make any profit or even receive any coins in return for those sacrifices? I don't know how that's tongue-in-cheek, okay? Did we hope that we were going to receive coins for the sacrifices that we made? Did we personally assume? Yes, but if I didn't receive coins in return, where was I, and what leg would I have had to stand on? Well, I still made my money donated to freedom of speech. Now, it's not just those types of things that he's talking about, but they also say so-called decentralized platforms. That's another term that keeps coming up over and over in this lawsuit when they're talking about things like Uniswap, when they're talking about things like Pulse Chain, Ethereum. They keep calling them so-called decentralized platforms, even though they've mentioned that Ethereum is, in the past, Gary Gensler said Ethereum is not a security. Now they want to say that they're so-called decentralized, but that they don't really believe it. So, they're just kind of going through all of these gray areas and muddying the waters. But if you really read into it deeply, if you really read into what Richard Hart spoke about during the sacrifice phases, every single time that he was on stream, it seems pretty clear, because it was to me when I sacrificed, that I wasn't expecting a profit. I was in charge of my own decision, and knowing that what I sent to Richard Hart, I wasn't potentially going to get anything in return. Now, yeah, sure, I was hoping to get some PulseX tokens or Pulse Chain tokens, or whatever you sacrificed for, but I didn't expect to make any money because it was very clear to me about that. So, very gray area of things that they're talking about. And if you want to say tongue in cheek, a lot of this lawsuit, in my opinion, is tongue in cheek more than what Richard Hart said on the streams.
Yeah, and Brendan, you mentioned earlier that in order for something to constitute a security, right, it has to pass the 4 tenets of the Howey test, right? For something to be considered a security, there has to be an investment contract. And for that to happen, there are 4 parts that has to be checked off in order for something to be considered an investment contract and therefore a security. We'll actually post this link also. Jen, if you could post the link in the chat about the details about exactly what makes up an investment contract and a security, and the details of the Howey test, so that folks can do some further reading if they wanted to. But we'll go over it a little bit here. So the number one thing is that there has to be an investment of money, right? And just off of that, right, you could instantly dismiss a ton of these allegations, right? Because when people sacrificed, even in the beginning for Hex, and then for Pulse Chain, and then for Pulse X, people sacrificed currency, but I don't think there was any money sacrificed. Now, you could double check me on this, but I'm pretty sure that there was no actual money donated to Richard Hart, right? Everything was in the form of cryptocurrency. Now, a lot of people are going to make the argument, well, Jay, isn't that a semantic argument? And yes, it is a semantic argument. But the reality is, the law is based around the semantics, right? There's a reason why when our government officials create law, right, they're very specific with the language that they use, right? They're very precise with the language that they use, because you don't want anybody to find any loopholes through this law, and you want the law to be clear to everybody who's trying to interpret it, right? You want as little loopholes as possible, and you want to leave as little room for interpretation as possible when you're creating that law. And so the semantics are important, right? So when they say money, they actually mean money, like dollars, right? And that's important, because everything that was given to the OA, right, was in the form of cryptocurrency, right? And the reason why that's important, right? You could look at like, for example, if somebody were to commit murder, right? The definition of murder is clearly defined. And they even go as far as to define it different ways, right? There's first, there's second, there's third degree. They even differentiate between like murder and manslaughter. And even in manslaughter, there's a differentiation between like regular manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter, right? There's a reason why this language is extremely precise. And so, yes, the semantics actually do matter when it comes to this case, right? And so when it comes to the investment of money, well, guess what? There's there were certainly some cryptocurrencies invested, right? But as far as money is concerned, that there was absolutely zero investment of money. And you can extrapolate that to like all of these other tokens within the cryptocurrency space, right? When people are when companies are doing the ICO, right? Unless actual money was invented into a specific company and not just currency, then in that instance, it immediately fails the Howey test, right? The next part is there has to be a common enterprise, right? And a common enterprise just means that the people investing have, like, they share a common goal, right? Now, you can certainly argue that people have the goal of the people investing within the space, right? In this case, in the ecosystem, was to expect like profit, right? Was to make money. But like Brendan alluded to earlier, right? Richard Hart made it very explicit that the reason why you're investing into this project is for free speech and to not expect any profits from the work of others, right? So you might be able to argue that there was a common enterprise in this case, right? Free speech for Pulse X, it was for freedom of movement, right? So there's certainly a common enterprise there, right? So you can certainly make an argument there. But what about the other parts, right? There's an expectation of profit. Well, like Brendan said earlier, Richard Hart was pretty explicit in his messaging, no expectation of profit. And then the last part of the Howey test is from the work of others, right? Once again, he was very clear when making these tokens, right? When he was releasing these projects, there are no expectation of profit from the work of others. Even Hex itself, he made it very clear to people. What is Hex? Hex is a smart contract that is perfect. It is complete. It is locked and sealed away. You, as an investor, interact with the smart contract yourself. Richard Hart and his developers do not press a button, right? They don't do any of the work when you interact with the smart contract, right? When you stake your coins, right? And you served your promised time, right? However long the length of the stake is, and then you end your stake, You mine your own coins. You as the investor is doing the work, right? So even just a surface level analysis of the Howey test and how Richard Hart, the verbiage surrounding Hex and his projects, the reason why he did that was specifically so that the SEC can't trap him when it comes to the language of the Howey test, right? So those were my initial thoughts when I saw some of the allegations against Richard Hart and his projects. And so I kind of want to open it up to the rest of the guys here. Do you have any comments on that? Because when I saw that, I was like, I was checking this stuff off the list, and it was failing every single aspect of the Howey test.
Well, it's going to be failing it. Like when one of the things that Richard Hart is specifically trying to do with Hex in general is automatically make it, well, decentralized. He doesn't like centralization. He tries to decentralize everything. Even if there is something that is centralized in the Hex ecosystem, he still makes these offshoots that basically makes it decentralized again. It's like that is against securities entirely, right? So that's number one. Number two is, here's the thing. We have a Bitcoin ETF coming out. We have Hong Kong with an Ethereum or ETH ETF coming out. Or actually, it is already out. And then I can bet you right now that, BlackRock and all of them are going to be following suit. Okay, so if you call Hex a security, or Pulse Chain a security, you're also calling Ethereum a security, because those two go hand in hand. Pulse Chain is literally an exact copy. Well, fork really, but yeah, they just copied it right over. It's the reason why it was the largest airdrop in crypto history, is because literally just forked it, took that Ethereum network and just doink right over here and just made it run better. So I don't understand, other than just for some weird fudding and desperation, quite frankly, why they'd be going after the Hex ecosystem, Pulse Chain and all that so hardcore right now, when it is so very clearly not a security. Like, somebody didn't do their homework and probably tripped and fell in their face over on this one. Gary Gensler.
What doesn't make sense to me is the SEC. I don't think that the SEC. I don't know a whole lot about the SEC or the SEC and the Howey test, and like where the Howey test came from. Was it created by the SEC? Was that where it came from? Does anyone know?
So
yeah, it came out. It came. Yeah, it came out it was a 1946 U.S. It was SEC versus Howey. I believe it was a Supreme Court case, but I could be wrong. But either way, it was USC versus Howey in 1946, and it establishes what makes a security. If what I said was incorrect, somebody correct me, but it's along those lines.
Yeah, pretty much, Josh. SEC versus W.J. Howey Company in 1946, to define what is a security and what's not. Jay, I saw you were talking there on mute. You want to add something?
No, you got it. I just wanted to make a quick comment. It actually had something to do with real estate and orange groves. So Jen will post the link in the chat for those of you who want to dive deeper into exactly how the Howey test was formed and how that precedent was set. Jen will post that in the chat for you guys. You'll give you the link. But go ahead, Brendan.
Yes. Well, I was just gonna say, like, the premise of my question revolves around, like, so the SEC basically, like, for all intents and purposes, they create this system of, hey, this is what determines whether something is a security or not a security. And so they create a guideline, and Richard Hart walks along. He says, oh, hey, look at this guideline. I want to make a thing, and I'm going to follow this guideline and not do these things, and I'm going to create a thing. And then the SEC is like, hey, you fucking followed our guideline and made fun of us for it. You got a thing that follows this guideline to determine whether this thing is not something that we can, have a say over. And it's just like, they're just being little children about it. It's like they are acknowledging the fact that he followed, like when they talk about him, what was the phrasing, like being tongue in cheek or being coy or whatever about like he knows what he's doing. They acknowledge that in their little in the filings. And so it's like, hey, we know that this guy knows what he's doing. he's following our guidelines that we made. You know, the whole thing is disingenuous. The whole thing's a giant joke. It's amusing. It's free publicity, and I think it's a gift. So
How dare you?
yeah, exactly. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Will, because like you mentioned, Richard Hart was they say it's tongue in cheek, probably because they saw how he was messaging and he saw exactly how he was portraying himself, right? So that probably pissed them off to some degree. But to your point, when you make guidelines for something and somebody follows it to a T, you can't now go along and say, "Hey, you broke the rules." Like, no, I read your rules and I followed your rules. And guess what? Other people who you told you weren't following the rules as we intended it to, when they reach out to you, like Brian Armstrong, like a whole bunch of other companies within the cryptocurrency space who wanted some regulatory clarification, when they reached out to you, what did you do? Did you clarify anything? No, you did not. So what did they do? Well, they interpreted these laws the best that they can. And in Richard Hart's case, I think he did probably one of the most stellar jobs in terms of creating a product that specifically navigates around the Howey test so that you can't label it as security. Whether you're upset about his messaging or how he presented himself, it's beside the point. The question that you need to ask is, did he break the rules or not? And the answer is, he did not. You know, we were talking about this earlier when I was watching other commentators about this. It really upset me that some of these people who actually give out good information. There was this one guy, not going to mention his name because I think he's actually a pretty stellar guy. It was so hilarious to me because he was presenting the overall arching attack of the SEC, right? The SEC saying to Coinbase, like we alluded to earlier, hey, you can't list Coinbase, you can't list anything on your exchange except Bitcoin. And then this gentleman played a video explaining exactly what the Howey test was. And then after this video plays out, he mentioned the SEC case with Richard Hart. And he's like, well, look at the SEC finally doing something correctly. Finally going for the low-hanging fruit. If you were going to win against anybody, you're definitely going to win against Richard Hart and his scam of a coin and his scam of an ecosystem. And I thought to myself, I'm like, my guy, what happened to all of your objective reasoning? Did that just go out the window? Isn't it pretty hilarious that you show people what constitutes a security, and then and then just because you don't like this person or don't like his projects, now you're going to say that he is a scam, not applying the same strict vetting process that you usually do? It just completely blew my mind. It's like it's a complete clown world, and this is exactly what Gary Gensler and his people at the SEC are doing. It's like they're what they're trying to do is they're trying to save face, right? Because they took an L against Ripple, and they can't slow down their attacks against crypto because that would be a sign of weakness. There's a reason why they're. Go ahead.
They just chose the fucking they chose the guy who followed the shit. It's so amusing. Like they're just taking every single like terrible step that they can, and it's just like. At some point, you watch a guy run up and down the basketball court, fumbling the ball and tripping over his shoelaces. You wonder, like, when is the coach going to pull this poor fucker out of the game and, like, replace him with somebody competent who knows the rules and can at least, like, understand how to do things?
Hey, now, we're not talking about Joe Biden here. I mean, come on.
I don't know if you watched basketball, but the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year, couldn't dribble the ball other than off his foot. Not only did they not take him out, but they signed him to a max contract in the largest of the history of the NBA. So doesn't mean that you're good at what you do. Sometimes you just get paid because it happens to happen. So I just want to touch one more thing on this topic, though. If we can zoom in on that a little bit. So, Jay, what you said is 100% correct. They know that Richard Hart knows what the Howey test is. And they know that he followed it to a T. So all that they can say is he frequently made veiled references about why investors, by the way, this is a typo, can expect profits. That should say can't expect profits. Okay, they can't even read, or maybe they don't fully understand what they're supposed to be writing here. There's a lot of these mistypes, as Josh was saying earlier, that just make this whole thing not really look like it was put together with a well thought out or a well produced case. Okay. Richard Hart said no one's going to receive money. No one can expect to gain off of other people's work. No one can expect profits. So they're saying, yeah, he said that, but he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it that way. He meant that they should expect profits. How can you literally take what someone says in writing and in word and say, okay, he didn't mean it? Literally, that's what they're saying. This entire paragraph and section is saying that what Richard Hart said in writing and in word isn't what he meant. Now, let me ask you this. In a court of law, how likely is a prosecutor to win a case trying to say that what they said they didn't mean every single time they said it? Ask any lawyer, ask any friends that you have that have ever studied law, that have ever been in a courtroom. Oh, yeah, he said that. Of course he said that, but he didn't mean it. What is the judge going to say at that moment? Yeah, you know what? You're right. He couldn't have meant what he said in writing and in word. That just can't hold up in a court of law. They have to take you at your word. You know, that's what an eyewitness is. An eyewitness is someone being taken at their word in a court of law. That is the entire basis of our legal system. People saying and writing words, and that's what they're taken at face value. Okay? You can't read between the lines in a court of law. Jay, you were talking about it. We use specific wording for a reason when we write up things like the Howey test, when we write up legal parameters of things like securities. And then you're going to go and not take him on his word? It's laughable to me. So I think that's something that we really needed to touch on and really needed to explain. And I wanted to show you all that and point that out. So kind of funny to me.
You know, another thing, I was reading a little bit off the top, off that little segment that you put, and it said there that the people investing in this ecosystem were expecting Pulse tokens, right? But here's the thing, right? I don't think any of us, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when this released, right, the tokens were worth 0. They were all worth 0. How do you profit from something that's worth 0? Do you know who created the price? Right? Who created the price? The
market.
Community did.
The market did. Yeah.
Right? And so I'm sorry. I don't know how anybody can profit off of something that's worth 0. I know that's a bit tongue in cheek. Gary Gensler might have something to say about me being tongue in cheek about being able to make profits off of something that's 0. But the case stands. When these tokens were released, nobody made a profit. The market decided what value they were going to place on these tokens. Not Richard Hart. Not anybody that was working for him. It was us.
You guys are making very well-rounded and reasonable arguments, and that's where you're going wrong, is because you're expecting the people in charge to be logical, to understand reason, to not make typos, to follow if then sort of like statements. And so this is all fantastic and great and everything, but we're thinking rationally in a clown world. So maybe it's time that we put on the squeaky noses and big shoes and just start clomping around. That's the best way to go about doing things, guys.
That's why we have judges. That's why we have different tiers of the justice system. So if a low-level judge makes a mistake in interpreting law, you can appeal it. Now, the SEC could still appeal the Ripple case, right? That's still on the table. If they appeal the Ripple case and lose, if they take Richard Hart to court and lose, they take Coinbase to court and lose, then what power do they have? They really need to be careful, and they know that.
And here's the thing, right? When you mentioned the SEC taking the Ripple case to the Second Court of Appeals, I do want to make an argument, a rare argument for the SEC, right? And I think the reason why they're doing this is, Jen, if you could share this link in the chat. So, in light of a Judge Torres ruling for Ripple in that case against the SEC, right? That's going to set legal precedent, right? It can potentially set legal precedent. And guess what happened? Well, there's an open lawsuit against Terra Labs, or against Terraform Labs, right? Luna and Do Kwon. Now, everybody here, and I think everybody who's been pretty dialed in within the space knows that those guys are actually bad actors. Those guys are actually scammers and fraudsters and charlatans, right? And what happened? They filed a motion to dismiss the allegations that the SEC has levied against them that they were selling unregistered securities. The same exact charges that were dismissed against Ripple when it came to sales, programmatic sales, right? And so we know that the unfortunate reality of the world is, even though this was a win for the cryptocurrency space as a whole, and for us as investors, we know that there are bad actors in the space that are going to take advantage of the law. And this is a good example of that happening, right? We have Do Kwon and Terra Labs using this ruling to their advantage. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why the SEC isn't letting off their foot off of the gas pedal, because they know at the very least that there are certainly bad actors in the space that are going to use this law to their advantage. Now, they're getting a lot of things wrong, but I kind of want to give them some slack to that regard, right? That they are actually trying to, at the very least, catch some of these bad actors. I just hope that they would go after less of the good people and more of the bad people, right? Like Do Kwon, like Mashinsky, like Sam, your best friend Gary, Sam, but this is just me just kind of giving some of these people the benefit of the doubt, because I have absolutely no doubt that there are actually people in the SEC who have our good intentions at heart, right? Yep. They might stumble and fumble along in the dark, but I mean, I'm sure some of them do have good intentions, right? And this is one of those instances where I'm like, okay, I understand why you're still pursuing the case, right? Because people like Do Kwon are going to take advantage of it.
Sure, I get that, but isn't part of the problem is they put themselves in this poor position by bringing somebody like Ripple to court who wasn't trying to do anything wrong or bad in the industry, but was trying to create good transactions for banks? The SEC is really put themselves in a bad position by taking, like you said, people that aren't trying to harm the industry to court and then losing because of it. And so now they're setting precedent by losing in court when really they should have just been focusing on, like you said, the bad actors to begin with. So I agree with you that we don't want to let people like Do Kwon and Luna, Terra Luna off the hook, but they put themselves in this bad position. And if they continue to sue people where they're just going to clearly lose the case, then they're going to set legal precedent to let maybe parts. I don't think Luna and Do Kwon are fully going to get off the hook, but maybe some of those things that they shouldn't get off the hook for, that they might. But again, they're kind of making their bed and sleeping in it a little bit.
So this whole, you guys bring up good points, and I'm going to actually shift my position here a little bit, because Jay, you made me think of something when you spoke about them essentially misusing the law to go after the wrong guys. It reminds me a lot of basically not necessarily the legal precedent, but the societal, cultural, and stop me if I'm going off on a random tilt here, but I think about false rape allegations or things of that nature. Like women who go around making false rape accusations are delegitimate, and it becomes more and more common for people to go out there and cry wolf. It's essentially just going around crying wolf. And the SEC is a government agency that has a legitimate job. Even though I'm going to make fun of them for it, and I'm nihilistic about the government, I'm sure that they do good things, just like the FBI, the cops, the CIA, the IRS, everyone. Everyone in the government has a job to do, and I'm sure that the SEC has some sort of value that they provide to the world. And them going about and screwing around and chasing after fucking people who not crying wolf. They're crying wolf themselves. They're going out after illegitimate things for illegitimate reasons, and they're doing a really poor job of it, and they're mocking themselves. They're delegitimizing themselves and making people like me have even less faith in the government, and making people who are on the fence have even less faith in the government. And that kind of sort of makes society crumble a little bit, and it makes the system that's set up to do a job not do the job as well, because now everybody can see the monkey wrenches in the gears and everything gets all fucked around with it. So that's all I had on that.
You know, one of the other good things that's going to come out of this, I guarantee you, right? Look, this is a personal opinion. I think that the SEC, I think this case against Richard, against a lot of these assets for that matter, they don't have any legs to stand on, to be quite honest with you, right? That's my personal interpretation of this whole situation, right? You know what's going to happen after I think Richard Hart slams this out of the fucking park? It's that all of the naysayers are also now going to have no leg to stand on, right? Because it's been 3 years since the inception of Hex. At a certain point, we talked about Crying Wolf, right? At a certain point, when you tell me that somebody's a scammer, you are going to have to bring me some damn evidence of people getting scammed. Okay? And if he is the type of scammer that people say that he is, where are all of the victims? It's been 3 years, guys. Where are all of the victims? At a certain point, when you say something, you're going to have to give me some evidence of the actual crime being committed, and you're going to have to bring me the victims of said crime. And so when I think Richard and other people being accused of selling unregistered securities win their cases against the SEC, then these people are not going to have any leg to stand on, right? And I think somebody mentioned this earlier, but the only thing that this has done is it's removed the gatekeeping, right? Because the Hex movie was being released to a select few theaters, and now Hex is front and center of major news outlets. So yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, please bring your evidence, right? Bring your evidence, bring your witnesses, bring your victims to the table. And if you can't, well, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, they're being real dumb right now, quite personally. So here's something that I just realized. BitBoy just tweeted something out right now. Something else that I've been kind of looking at is that a lot of these other big streamers, as far as like the Pulse Chain, Hex side, even just in crypto in general, right? They're all getting on this now. Here's the crazy thing. Earlier today, we were like, while we were making all these moves in all the swaps and everything, when this was all happening, we were in our own community. We were in our own Telegram. Hey, people, look at this, look at this, look at this. Like, we were on the ball. We're not just selfishly doing our own thing, and then we come back after we're all done and then start talking to people about it. People are panicking now. People are like trying to figure things out now. Everyone who is in our group, they got everything that they needed, right? And so with that being said, we're always here for you, man. Like, we are on it. We are fire. And so I would say get into our Telegram right now. You're going to be getting the earliest alpha, quite frankly, that's out there. We're even doing this show, quite frankly, before a lot of these other bigger guys, crypto guys, are even talking about it. So I'd suggest doing that. But with that being said, I know that like we definitely need to look at some charts on this, because what the heck happened today? Like, Jay, that one's on you, man. Like, tell us what happened today. That's some crazy charting going on here.
Yeah, Jay, while you get that pulled up, what I would like to see, after you're done doing the TA, if you could just keep the chart up, I would love for you and Billy to have a conversation, if you guys could, to see if there's any, if you guys are seeing sentiment in the TA chart, and if there's any correlation there, if you guys could just have a conversation, and the research that you did, Billy, and bringing up the sentiment after Jay goes through TA. But yeah, definitely, guys, while that's getting pulled up, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate all the live stream, or all the live comments that we have coming in. If you guys have questions, throw them out. We'll try to get to them the best that we can, as long as we can stay on topic. And Jay, once you can get that pulled up, I'll go ahead and share it.
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let me know if you could see my multi-chart here. I'm actually going to go ahead and start with the P-Hex and die pair. Can you guys see this okay?
Gotcha.
Yep, good to go.
Cool.
Zoom in a little
So,
bit might help, but yeah,
is this good?
it's great.
Cool. Okay, so what you're seeing here isn't going to be significantly different from how the from the rest of the RH tokens, right? All of their charts look pretty similar, right? We have a significant the price taking a shit, right? You see that this long-term trend line was broken, and we actually came down close to some of the prices here that we had during the first week of Pulse Chain's release, right? But I will say though, out of all of the RH tokens, P-Hex has definitely held up the best. All right. And to be quite honest with you, it surprised me exactly how fast this price was bought up, because I thought that we were going to hang around here for a little bit longer period of time. But this just goes to show you guys exactly how strong the community is within the RH ecosystem, right? Because this price was bought up extremely quickly. Now, we did break through this this upward sloping trend line, and so if we were going to head back up, I have this line, this resistance line here, right? This is probably going to be, if I had to take an educated guess based on my TA, this is probably the area we're going to get some significant resistance on the way back up. Before we even interact with this trend line again, because if we take a fib retracement from our local high here and take it to our swing low, if you see here that lines up with the 0.382 level. Now, if you know anything about Fibonacci, the 0.382 level is kind of like the first wall of resistance that price needs to reclaim in order for it to start going back to the upside. So if we were going to start rallying back up, expect this area here, the 0.382 fib level, or around 1.4 cents, to serve as our first major resistance. If you notice here that it actually also lines up with some of the tops of these candles over here, right? Like for example, here, if you were tracking this during the 20-day cycle, this was our cycle high a few cycles ago, right? So expect this to form our first major resistance, at the very least, until we interact with this trend line again. Now, if we were to head downwards, I expect to find support here at about 0.6 of a penny. Right? I don't think we're gonna go that low. I think we're probably going to, if we are going to start heading back down, that we are going to slowly drip back down. I don't think we're gonna go make new lows for P-Hex in particular, because this asset has held up so strongly. But again, you have to keep up with what's going on in the news over the next few days and the next few weeks to see exactly how this case unravels, right? Because that will determine if we're going to start rallying back up, or if we're going to go back down and either test these lows or make new lows. But for me personally, I don't think P-Hex in particular is going to make new lows. Now let's go ahead, and I'm going to go over here and switch to Pulse Chain. So this is Pulse Chain against DAI. As you can see here, like I mentioned, the chart doesn't look too dissimilar from P-Hex, right? We broke through this upward sloping trend line that was serving as support, and we collapsed below it. Now, we recovered slightly. And so if we were to continue back down, I expect this price around here, this is, let's see, this is 4 zeros and a 5.8. I expect this lower band here of this box to serve as support. All right. If this breaks, then we can keep heading downwards, probably to around here, right? To the price that we had during the first week of release, which is 4 zeros and a 3.5, right? But before we even get to this price, let's focus on this area of support first. If this area of support breaks, that's when you can start planning to DCA and lower. But again, let's keep this area of price in the back of our minds first, because this is going to serve as support. When on the way back up, I expect this the this level of resistance right here, which is the top band of this box at around 4 zeros and a 7-7. I think that's probably where we are going to we are going to meet some kind of heavy resistance, because that was the prior low, right? That was the prior local low before we started rallying back up. And so expect this level right here of 4 zeros and a 7-7 to serve as our first major level of resistance if we do start rallying back up. This is for pulse chain. Now let's move over to Pulse X against DAI. All right. Once again, this chart doesn't look too dissimilar. So with Pulse X, we did come pretty close to this area of this is 5 zeros and a 9-7. But like I mentioned, the community pretty much rallied around this severe dump in price and bought it right back up. And so if we were going to start coming back down, I expect this price right here of 5 zeros and a 9-8 to serve as support, right? But for almost every single one of the RH tokens, we're kind of in an area of new price discovery. And the reason why I say that is because as opposed to this large chunk of price action here, right, we don't really have a lot of prior price history here, right? So even though we have some slight support at these lower levels, we don't really have a lot of price history, right? And so if we come back down, yes, this area of 5 zeros and a 9-7 is going to serve as a mild support for Pulse X, but we're in an area of new price discovery here if we do keep heading back down. Now, if we rally back up, similar to Pulse Chain, right? This area right here of this is 4 zeros and a 2-7. Right, 4 zeros and a 2-7, I expect to be our first major area of resistance if we do start to rally back up, because like Pulse Chain, this price of 4 zeros and a 2-7 was our local low before we started to try and rally back up. So for Pulse X in particular, expect this range here of 4 zeros and a 2-7 to serve as our first major level of resistance if we do start to rally back up. Now let's go over to Incentive and DAI, everybody's favorite Incentive token. Now Incentive is actually the only one out of all of the RH tokens to make a new all-time low. We have a new all-time low here for Incentive at 1.96 cents. So if we head back down, we're in completely new territory. So I know some people were predicting sub $1 incentive. That might actually happen. But again, like I mentioned earlier, we have to see how the news unravels over the next few weeks to really see where this is going to head. But out of every single RH token, this is the one that's basically in new price discovery region, right? Because we made a new all-time low today. If we were to start heading back up, now Incentive was the weakest out of every single RH token, right? It still had not broken out of this long-term downtrend that had been forming since about like the third week of Pulse Chain. So if we were to start to rally back up, the first level of resistance you're going to meet is around here at $5.21. Similar to the story with Pulse Chain and Pulse X, that area of $5.21 was the local low before incentives started to try and rally back up to the upside. You notice too that long-term downwards trend line does cross that price range. So if incentive were to slowly try and rally back up here, it's probably going to interact with that price range and also that trend line. So expect this area of $5.21 to serve as pretty our first major area of support if we do to start heading back up.
So, hey, Jay, if you don't mind, I would like to actually make a comment in there. I actually bought a little bit of incentive token because exactly as you said right there on the chart, right? I saw that and I was thinking to myself, hey, this is going to go back up a little bit. So I'm going to buy just a little bit in, right? Not going to go ham, but I bought some in and then I'm yield farming it now to gain more for when it starts going back up. You kind of see how that play would happen there?
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty good point, Nate. I was speaking speaking to either you guys or probably some of the guys in our Telegram group, which is on specific tokens, right? I don't like to put any money in unless we're at the very least anywhere between 90 to 90%, 95% down from all-time highs. And if we take our price tool here, let's see. So at current price, we are at about 96% down from all-time highs for incentive token. And so if you were going to take a punt at incentive token, this is probably the area where you would consider taking a shot, right? 90 to 95% down from all-time highs. I'm not saying that incentive token is a meme coin, but this is a personal rule that I set for myself when I'm investing in meme coins. 90 to 95% from all-time highs before I throw anything at it. So that was actually a really good point, Nate. And then last but not least, the OG, the prodigal son, for Hex. I'm actually going to go to TradingView for this chart in particular. Give me 1 second. Because TradingView has a longer history for Hex than Dex Screener. So I want to share this one instead. Here we go. Let me go ahead and full screen this. There we go. So this is the weekly chart for Hex. And if you can see here, I have this purple box of support drawn out, right? And we were talking about this during the initial dump that eHex experienced. And I made it a point to say that, guys, look, this purple box of support is kind of like our last great wall of support. That if we collapse further down here, that's when I'll probably consider eHex to be in serious danger. Now, I'm not trying to FUD here. I'm only trying to tell you what I see on the chart. And if you can see, the price did wick down below this purple box of support, but it was bought right back up. And so eHex, it's at a point in time right now that it really needs support from the community, right? Because if we lose this band of support, the next level down is right here, right? At about 0.3 of a penny. Now, if I switch over, give me a second here. What in the heck is going on with my chart? Give me a second. Okay, there we go. I'm going to try and switch over to the daily chart. I'm going to share this again with you guys. Sorry about that. It was kind of wonky on my end. 1 second. Go back to StreamYard. Share screen. And go back to my Hex chart, which is... Here we go. There it is. Okay. So we are back here in the daily chart. It's a lot easier to see here in the daily chart. Now, if we go all the way back, you see these little dots, right? This is a time in Hex's price history, eHex, where no price action was occurring, right? It went days where nobody was buying or nobody was selling, right? And so as a community, the community really needs to rally behind eHex and hold this level of support. Otherwise, I mean, we're going to come down as low as 0.3 of a penny here, right? And that's what I'm really going to start considering that eHex might be in danger. Right, but for right now, we're holding this purple band of support over here at about 0.6 of a penny pretty well. So let's just hope and pray that the community does hold this price up, and I'm pretty certain that it will. Right, I don't think the people invested in eHex long term are going anywhere, and the whales are going to support this area of price. Right, and if you notice, the last thing that I want to point out here. The last thing that I want to point out here to you guys is, despite this significant dump in price, what you notice here is we still have bullish divergence. Bullish divergence is, what is bullish divergence? Lower lows in price, but higher lows on our momentum indicator. In this case, the RSI, right? Higher lows on the RSI, but lower lows in price. So if that's any consolation, we still do have a bullish divergence on the RSI against the price of EHEX. So if that's any kind of consolation, I hope some of you guys can take some consolation in that, because I'm usually the optimist, but EHEX is teetering on this last area of support that I drew out here. So just want to give you guys some perspective. Like I said, I like EHEX. I'm an investor at EHEX, and I believe in it long term. I'm just trying to present to you guys the data that I see here in the chart, and it is knocking on the door at that last pretty big chunk of support. So that's all that I have for you guys on the TA here. Hopefully you guys got some value out of that. I'm going to go ahead and throw it back to some of the guys. I know that Josh wanted Billy to kind of go over some of the things that he might have seen on the chart as well. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to Josh and Billy.
Yeah, just real quick. Could you go to go pull up the let's pull up the pulse chain chart.
Pulse chain chart? Sure thing, my friend.
Yeah. Pull up the pulse chain chart and let's go to the 30-minute intervals. And then
my man wants to go degenerate.
Degenerate.
30 minutes.
This isn't really for TA purposes. I just wanted to, if Billy has a timeline or anything that he saw, from this time to this time, this was happening. This is what he saw on social media and stuff like that. So that way we could get a reference for what was actually going on the technical analysis side.
Well,
but Billy,
here's a 30-minute chart.
So is that the 30-minute chart? Is that what we're looking at? Okay.
Yes, sir. There's a 30-minute chart right here.
All right, cool. All right, so Billy, I don't know if this helps you. If this isn't, then he can turn it off and you can just take the floor. But I wanted to give that to you to sort of use as a visual too, if you wanted to. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you with what you saw on the sentiment side.
Yeah. So when the news hit, and we were watching the dump, I was watching the deck screener. The people buying it back up and buying the wick back up. And it certainly looked like there was plenty of whoever was selling off with their weak hands, there was hodlers looking to buy, a lot like us, looking to make a DCA at that lower level. And you saw that in real time, with the dump. I mean, you had to have the thought, is this shit going to zero? I mean, is this it, and it didn't do that. It was bought back up in a relatively quick fashion on most of the charts. So, again, that just shows the fortitude of the community, that there's still people who have dry powder on the sidelines that are looking to get by the dip, and I think that was encouraging right out of the gate, that it just didn't dump and dump and dump and dump. But if you think about what was going on before today, there was infighting about EHEX and PHEX, and there was, douchebaggery, galore, and all this other bullshit going on in the Hex ecosystem. And this has definitely stopped everybody in their tracks, and changed the tone of the conversation. I definitely think for the better. Now we're all on a unified front against, evil Gary, right? But for what it's worth, it's also gives a curiosity is happening, where you've got two types of people. You got people that are already invested, and then they've got everybody else who we want to come in. And there's curiosity, with what's going on with the news story, then there's this movie, all these people. I mean, it's just bringing attention, as we've said many times. Now, BitBoy going to bat right away. It looks like I was just reading the tweet, BitBoy's going to bat for Hex. Other people, are standing up who maybe were even critics of Hex, just to say, hey, this is another example of the overreach of the SEC. Who better to fight the fight than fucking Richard Hart, man? I mean, we know he's the smartest guy in crypto. Like, we know he's the best debater. I mean, he could get in court himself and probably win the case. But of course, he'll have, high-paid lawyers, and how the community came around the FUD with the SEC complaint about the influencers taking money. Quickly, some of the community threw money together to get better lawyers. So this is where we're different than other cryptos that would have just gone to zero with this type of FUD. So, you know, on the chart, I mean, you could hope that this is the bottom, right? We've already all been feeling like the bottom was in, you know, but maybe this is the bottom or this event. Although I did feel, Jay, you know, I could feel your reluctance to say, hey man, this could still keep going down, you know. So that's a wake-up call and a reality to all of us that, you know, like more FUD could continue. But you know, it's hard to imagine something else, you know, than this. And I think the sentiment is shifted already to a unified front, you know, and that's a good thing for the community. You know, Hexicans are long-term thinkers, right? We're thinking about 5555. We're thinking about the future of finance and self-sovereignty and, you know, DeFi. And I mean, all those things challenge the banking industry and challenge the status quo, you know? So we couldn't expect that they were just going to let us, you know, get our 20 or 39% APY, you know, and not have a fight. I mean, that challenges everything else. That's a Nobel Prize winning technology, you know, and so, you know, the traditional finance doesn't know what the fuck to do with this type of stuff. So, you know, this is all to be expected, man. I just think, you know, if this is the rock bottom or, you know, we're near the bottom, then those of us that didn't get shooken out by this, you know, again, it's really it's changing me as a crypto investor to be a part of something like this. I had thoughts, you know, shit, do I move it all into ETH, you know, as just a safe haven or something? But again, I kept remembering just, you know, maybe just don't do anything. Maybe just hold tight and just ride this wave out, you know, because we've seen waves up and we've seen waves down, you know, and had we not seen the wave up to 12 cents, I wouldn't really believe that we can go up, but I do believe we can go up from here. And I do believe that, you know, the charts, as funky as they look, when you zoom out on the time frame and you zoom out over, you know, several cycles, it's going to be up and to the right. The T-share goes up and to the right. It's built into the code. You know, they can't shut the code down, you know. I mean, they can do whatever they want to Richard, but it's between me and the code. So, you know, and I think that this was maybe it was a good thing that we were all putting, you know, Richard on this pedestal, and, you know, obviously, you know, now we get to get behind him in the fight and everything. But, you know, this changed the narrative of the community and the sentiment and just put everything into perspective in a really good way. If you can look at it through that lens, you know. And now we will watch it play out. And the XRP thing just made people even more zealot about, you know, their zealousy only increased as the court case went on, you know. And I think that's what we're going to see with this too. And those that haven't already been invested are going to become curious, and then that could lead them into the greatest financial product ever invented, you know.
Well, I'd like to add in too, like, think about this, Billy, right? So you're 100% correct about that there's no bad press, right? And so they're doing this to the Hexicans that ultimately is going to shed a light for all of crypto to be looking at us now, like, hey, what's going on over here? Oh crap, wait, they beat their ass again, right? Again, this is XRP all over again, right? Except XRP, I think, technically had a harder battle. So yeah, think about it this way, right? So you've got this press going on. Everybody's starting to like we're the focus now, being Hexicans, right? And now with that, you're also going to have that movie coming out that's going to be advertised everywhere and doing things as well. Like, there are so many people who are going to be seeing Hex, right? There's so many people who are going to be seeing Hexicans. There's so many people who are going to be getting interested in this. I'm not going to lie. Pulse Chain, there's a lot of things that are a lot of fun with it. I have a lot of fun when I'm messing around with Pulse Chain. There's a lot of good stuff to use, and it works very well. I think, personally, this, like, just getting people in, you know, getting people into Pulse Chain, just to play around a little bit, immediately people are going to be like, oh, this is really cool. I like it, you know? And kind of like how Phantom worked, as soon as they start playing around with it, they like it, it works well, they're making money off of it, right? Bam. That's when more and more people start bringing in more and more money. And again, part of perfect storm theory, right? This would be perfect storm theory for, well, Hexicans. So
Hey guys, I just wanted to jump in real quick. I have a hard out at 2 hours on our stream, so I just wanted to thank you guys all again for jumping on the stream, for our chat, for the members in our chat, for spending a little bit of your time with us today. But we're gonna stay on the ball and follow this news as it unravels. So just keep an eye out. If you're in the Telegram chat, you know that we discuss this in detail every single day. So you're not gonna miss a beat. But once again, I wanted to thank you guys, and I wanted to thank everybody that joined us in the stream today, because your time is certainly greatly appreciated. So I will go ahead and catch you guys later. Hope you got some value out of whatever insight that I was able to provide today. And I'll catch you guys probably later on tonight.
Take it easy, Jay.
Yes, sir. Brother. Yeah, that sounds good. Hey, I actually think that's a good segue. I think that's a pretty good conversation that we had. So what I would like to do is I would like to go ahead and just go around and give you guys the opportunity to give final thoughts. And if you guys wanted to plug social medias, what you guys what you guys are working on, stuff like that, I'll give you guys the opportunity to do that also. So let's go ahead. Will, let's start with you. Then we can go ahead and go over to Dace.
I've got nothing going on as far as crypto goes, just trying to level up and get better in the world. You can follow me on my socials that are down in the description. I hope you guys are holding your bags. And if you want to sell, I hope you sell quick so that I can buy those suckers up. Give me all your coins. That's all I got. Dace, you're up.
At Dace Northal on Twitter. Follow me if you want to hear more about this stuff. That's about it. It's good to be back on stream with you guys.
All right, Willie Belong 33. What you got, buddy? Where can they?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm on Twitter there. Yeah, at Willie Belong 33. I mean, not getting into too much trouble these days, but yeah, just keeping up on everything. And I hope you guys again just know that you know, we have each other in this group, the Roundtable. And if you're feeling down or feeling alone about, you know, some of this stuff, jump in the chat and you know, ask some questions. And you know, our strength is in the community. So again, we're not alone in this, boys.
yeah, I agree with that there, Billy. Like, get into our chat, man. Like I said, we were saying this stuff before any of these popular crypto guys you're looking at. We're saying that already, and now they're starting to come out and do things. It's like you could have been ahead of the curve, right? If you're in our channel, ultimately. So yeah, get into the Telegram channel, man. So I've got a bunch of things coming up. We're still continuing the LPing farms and everything. Again, today was a little bit of a crazy day, and so we didn't quite go to 100% with it. Also, there was some medical issues that ended up happening. It was kind of like, okay, yeah, let's just save this for now. But yeah, we're going to be going to DeFi Kingdoms. From there, there's a lot of other, like, we got a lot of other episodes coming in. And from there, we're actually going to be segueing into GameFi. And GameFi is going to be huge this coming cycle, this coming bull cycle. You don't want to miss out. Look forward for the next week or two. And we're going to be making a lot of content about how to build your money printers, how to retire off of crypto, how to be able to go through all this stuff. So yeah, tune in, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because you're not going to want to miss this, quite frankly.
All right. So thank you all, first of all, for joining us. There's a couple things I want to end on. There is a little bit of a difference between the XRP case and the Pulse Chain case, not based on the SEC, but Ripple and XRP could only be purchased on centralized exchanges. And so in the United States, they gave a cease and desist and no one was allowed to sell Ripple and XRP in the United States for the last 2 years. That's not the case with Pulse Chain, because it is a level 1 decentralized. You can swap coins over, to Pulse X. You can swap USDC into Pulse. There's no way that they can shut down the buying power of Pulse Chain and the Richard Hart ecosystem. And that's a very big difference between the Ripple case and the case that they're bringing against Richard Hart. So keep that in mind. Now, there is a chance that this can drag on. All SEC court cases tend to generally drag on. But I also could see a case where we start to get some better government regulations, and cases like this just end up being non-existent. But yeah, we could see this holding out for a while. How much does it affect the price in the short term? Well, we'll see. But long term, I think that this is still going to be a very, for me personally, a very good hold on my coins, and an opportunity for me to increase a little bit of my position at lower prices. Again, nothing we've talked about or that we're saying is financial advice. We're not experts and shouldn't be taken as such. But there are some differences here. And again, this is even a more solid case, in my opinion, for Richard Hart versus the SEC than Ripple was. So I think it's a no-brainer. Don't believe the FUD out there. Follow me at anonymous_bean on Twitter, Anonymous Bean Crypto. Tell your friends to follow us, like, subscribe, family members, firstborn children, future ex-wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, sons, and daughters. Thank you.
All right. And of course, we want to give a shout out to our our lovely producer that's working behind the scenes, Miss Jen. Thank you so much for your effort tonight. It was greatly appreciated. Again, guys, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you guys log into social media. You can find our social medias down. We are social media official now. So we got Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram. All the links are down in the description. Make sure you guys join that Telegram group. Again, we had a great call. Dace made a quick video call, and we all were able to hop on. But that's information that you're not going to get everywhere else. So make sure you guys are a part of our Telegram. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Once again, thank you guys so much. I'm Josh. You guys can find me on Twitter at ChocolateTaints. Do we know when we're going to be streaming again? Brendan, did you have your introduction to coins coming up this week?
Potentially, but with what happened today and all of the things that kind of got thrown onto our plate, we'll see. It might be pushed back, so we'll probably get a midweek stream going, even if it's a short one, and definitely back to our Sunday schedule, I'd say. Right, Josh?
Yes, sir. That's correct. All right, so we will be back Sunday, 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when we will have our next episode of the DJ Roundtable. Make sure you guys hit that notification bell. Make sure you guys are in the Telegram. We give previews and we give special little insights on what we're going to be talking about. So catch a sneak peek there. Make sure you guys are subscribed. Again, we thank everybody that was here in the live chat. For everybody that's watching on replay, hopefully we'll catch you live next time. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Catch you back next Sunday, unless, of course, we decide to go live beforehand. You never know. Sometimes we like to do that. So until the next time, you guys have a good evening. Have a good night. Thank you so much.